Some blood remembers what people try to erase. The night the council tested Hannah Mercer, she told herself the cold in her fingers came from the stone floor beneath her shoes. It did not. Moonridge Court was warm enough to make the high windows sweat, warm enough for the torches along the black stone walls to bend and flutter in their iron brackets, warm enough for the gathered pack to loosen their collars and whisper behind gloved hands. Still, Hannah's palms stayed cold, and the small place at the center of her left hand, where her mother's old silver ring had once rested against her skin, burned as if someone had pressed a secret there and forgotten to take it back. She flexed her fingers once, carefully, where no one would notice. People like Hannah learned early how to make discomfort quiet. She stood at the edge of the great hall with the other unclaimed women, all of them dressed in pale ceremonial colors, though none of them wore white except Vanessa Hale. Vanessa stood near the front beneath the carved moon arch, golden hair arranged in a perfect crown of braids, chin lifted at the exact angle noble daughters practiced in mirrors. Hannah did not dislike her for being beautiful. Beauty had never been the problem in Moonridge. The problem was the way everyone treated beauty, blood, and rank as if they were the same thing. At the far end of the hall, on the raised stone platform, sat the blood basin, a shallow silver bowl filled with water drawn from the northern spring before sunrise. Behind it, half covered by shadow, stood the ancient Luna stone. It was taller than a man, dark blue-gray, veined with pale lines that looked almost like moonlight trapped under ice. For 70 years, it had done nothing. For 70 years, elders had called it symbolic, ceremonial, a relic from a wilder age when wolves listened to stones and storms more than councils. Hannah had heard all of this often enough to repeat it in Gideon Thorne's voice, each word polished smooth by authority. The stone no longer chooses. Blood chooses. Law chooses. The council confirms. She lowered her eyes before anyone could catch her looking too long. Her reflection trembled faintly in the silver basin from across the room, a pale young woman in a simple dove-gray dress that had been let out twice and hemmed once by Martha Reed because no one from the official household staff had been assigned to help her. The dress was clean. That was all Hannah had asked of it. Clean fabric. Straight seams. No borrowed jewels. Nothing that pretended she belonged where everyone knew she did not. A bell sounded once from the eastern tower, low and rounded, and the whispers thinned into silence. Counselor Gideon Thorne stepped forward with the blood registry tucked beneath one arm, his dark formal coat marked with the crescent seal of Moonridge. His eyes passed over the women in line, pausing kindly on daughters of old families, passing quickly over Hannah as if she were a smudge on an otherwise proper page. Then the side doors opened, and the air changed before the room did. Hannah felt it in her chest first, a tightening that was not fear exactly. The torches steadied. The guards near the wall straightened without being ordered. Conversations died in corners that had already been quiet. Nathaniel Cross, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, entered Moonridge Court with no crown on his head and no need for one. He wore a charcoal coat fastened at the throat with a silver wolf clasp, his light brown hair brushed back from a face too controlled to be called gentle and too still to be called cruel. His gaze moved through the room slowly, missing nothing. When it reached Hannah, it did not slide away the way other powerful men's eyes always had. It stopped. Only for a second. Only long enough for the heat in her palm to flare, sharp and bright, beneath her closed fingers. Hannah forgot to breathe. Behind Nathaniel, the ancient Luna stone gave off the faintest thread of light, so small it could have been a trick of torch fire, so brief no one else turned to look. But Hannah saw it. And somewhere deep inside her, in the quiet place where her wolf had not spoken since childhood, something lifted its head. Hannah had learned the shape of silence long before she understood why people expected it from her. It began when she was 8 years old, standing outside the council library with a stack of clean linens in her arms while two clerks inside discussed her mother as if Caroline Mercer had been an error in bookkeeping rather than a woman who had sung to her daughter during summer storms. Unregistered border blood, one of them had said. No confirmed house. No verified maternal line. Hannah had not known all the words then, but she had known the tone. It was the tone people used for spoiled milk, cracked glass, a name that made a table uncomfortable. After that, the lessons came in small, ordinary humiliations. She learned to wait until noble daughters had chosen their seats before entering a room. She learned to step aside in narrow halls, even when she had been there first. She learned that if someone called her deluded, uncertain, half-blooded, or unfortunate, the safest answer was a small smile that gave them nothing sharp enough to punish. Moonridge rewarded good breeding the way other places rewarded courage. A girl could be foolish, vain, or cruel, and still be forgiven if her bloodline stretched far enough back into approved records. Hannah's did not. Her father, Thomas Mercer, had been a quiet border captain who died in a winter fever when Hannah was 13. He had left her one narrow room above the West Laundry, 3 books with worn covers, and the memory of a man who had always stood between her and insult when he was alive. Her mother had left less that could be shown to the council: a silver ring, a faded pendant Hannah was not supposed to wear in public, and stories told in a soft voice about moonlit roads, old oaths, and women who listened when the earth went quiet. Those stories had sounded beautiful when Hannah was small. Later, they became dangerous. Beautiful things often did, when they belonged to women with no official protection. In the hall, Gideon Thorne opened the registry, and the sound of parchment turning carried farther than it should have. One by one, the eligible women were called. The basin glowed for Lydia Carr with a mild pearl light. It shimmered pale green for Rosalie Voss, whose aunt sighed with relief too loudly. It brightened silver for Vanessa Hale before Vanessa even touched the rim, and a pleased murmur moved through the room like silk being drawn across a polished table. Hannah watched all of it with her hands folded at her waist and the strange heat in her palm hidden beneath her thumb. Nathaniel Cross had taken his place near the platform, not seated, not relaxed, simply present in a way that made every other powerful man look arranged rather than born to command. He had not spoken since entering. He did not need to. When Gideon smiled at Vanessa, Nathaniel did not smile back. When the counselors leaned close to one another, Nathaniel's eyes moved once toward their hands, then toward the registry, and Hannah felt the absurd thought that he was reading the room the way Martha Reed read bread dough, knowing what had gone wrong before anyone else smelled the burn. At last, only Hannah remained. Gideon let the pause lengthen until people turned to look at her on their own. It was a practiced cruelty, clean enough to deny. Then he glanced toward the front row, where Vanessa stood beneath the moon arch, and said in a voice shaped for the entire hall, "Bring the Mercer girl forward last. It is important that every young wolf understand why blood still matters." Heat rose along Hannah's throat, but her face stayed calm. She stepped forward because refusing would become another mark against her, because running would make their story about her true, because somewhere behind the old stone, beneath 70 years of silence, that thin thread of light had answered her before any person in the room had. Every step Hannah took toward the platform sounded too clear to belong to her. The hall had been full of whispers only a moment before, all those careful little sounds people made when they wanted cruelty to feel like tradition, but now even the smallest movement seemed to wait for permission. Her shoes touched the black stone floor. Her dress brushed her ankles. Somewhere near the west wall, a child drew a breath and was gently hushed by an adult who did not want to miss what came next. Hannah kept her eyes on the blood basin because looking at faces would make them real, and she needed them to remain what they had always been to her in moments like this. Weather, not judgment. Gideon Thorne stood beside the basin with the registry open in both hands, his thumb resting near her mother's name as if it were a stain he had been forced to acknowledge. Up close, the silver water was not truly still. It moved in tiny circles, though no one had touched it, catching the torchlight and breaking it into pale pieces. Hannah remembered being 6 years old and watching her mother wash herbs in a white enamel bowl by the kitchen window, how Caroline had told her that water always knew what had been carried through it. Hannah had asked if water could keep secrets. Her mother had smiled then, but not happily, and said, "Only until someone asks the right question." Gideon's voice brought her back. "Place your hand in the basin, Hannah Mercer. Not Miss Mercer. Not daughter of Thomas Mercer. Not a girl of Moonridge. Just the name, bare and useful, like a label tied to a parcel." Hannah lifted her right hand, then stopped. The heat was still in her left palm, steady now, almost patient. She did not understand it, and because she did not understand it, she trusted it more than the part of herself that wanted only to survive the next minute unnoticed. She placed her left hand into the silver water. Cold climbed her wrist at once. Not natural cold, not the kind that belonged to winter mornings or stone rooms before dawn. This cold felt official. Measured. Decided. The water should have brightened. It should have drawn a color from her bloodline, even a faint one. Every young woman before her had received at least a shimmer, enough for the council to interpret, discuss, and file away beneath family seals. Hannah waited. The basin remained clear. A silence opened in the room, and into that silence Gideon lowered his head with the solemn disappointment of a man receiving exactly the result he had arranged. "There is no confirming mark," he said. His voice did not rise, which made it worse. No lunar resonance. No ancestral response. The Mercer line remains unverified and unsuitable for any claim connected to Luna law. He closed the registry halfway, then looked toward the gathered pack as if teaching a lesson. Her blood is too weak to carry what stronger houses are born to protect. The words did not strike Hannah all at once. They settled, one by one, like ash on clean fabric. Weak. Unverified. Unsuitable. She felt the room accept them because rooms like this were built to accept whatever men with seals declared. Vanessa Hale lowered her gaze with a softness that looked almost like pity from a distance and nothing like pity up close. A few council wives turned their faces aside. Someone near the rear exhaled in relief, as though Hannah's humiliation had restored order to the evening. Hannah withdrew her hand from the basin. Silver water slid from her fingers onto the front of her gray dress, leaving darker spots in the cloth. She did not wipe them away at first. She looked down at them and thought, absurdly, that Martha would be annoyed if the stain did not come out. That thought steadied her. Small, ordinary concerns had saved women in her family more than once. She reached into her sleeve, took out her mother's folded handkerchief, and dried her fingers with care. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Carefully, as if the entire hall had not just been invited to witness the official shrinking of her life. When she looked up, Nathaniel Cross was watching her. His expression had not changed enough for anyone else to read, but Hannah saw his hand tighten once around the silver wolf clasp at his throat. Behind him, the ancient Luna stone stood in shadow. Then came a sound so slight it might have been missed beneath a breath. A thin, bright crack appeared near the base of the stone, glowing like moonlight under ice. Hannah saw it. Nathaniel saw it. And for the first time that night, Gideon Thorne did not. The ceremony did not end so much as it was folded away. Gideon Thorne declared the verification complete, thanked the gathered families for honoring Moonridge tradition, and spoke with the calm authority of a man closing a door before anyone noticed smoke beneath it. People began to move again, chairs scraping softly, silk gowns whispering over stone, voices returning in careful layers. Hannah stepped down from the platform with her mother's damp handkerchief closed inside her fist. No one stopped her. That was another kind of humiliation, she thought, the ease with which a room could finish ruining a person and then turn toward refreshments. She walked without looking back, though every part of her wanted to glance once more at the ancient Luna stone. The glow had vanished by then. The crack, if it had truly been there, was hidden in shadow behind Nathaniel Cross, who still stood near the platform like a question no one had permission to ask. Hannah passed beneath the side archway and entered the east corridor, where the air was cooler and smelled faintly of dust, candle smoke, and wintergreen polish. Her hand had stopped burning, but the skin at the center of her palm felt too awake, as if it had heard something the rest of her had not. She meant only to return the ceremonial towel to the linen room and reach the west stairs before anyone decided to pity her in person. Pity was heavier than insult. Insult could be carried with a straight back. Pity tried to bend you for your own comfort. She had almost reached the turn toward the servants' passage when she heard Vanessa Hale's voice through the half-open archive door. Not loud. Worse than loud. Controlled. You said the basin would be enough. Hannah stopped so suddenly the towel slipped against her wrist. A second voice answered, low and dry. Gideon. The basin was enough for the room. Not for him. A pause followed, and in it Hannah heard paper being moved, the soft scrape of a drawer, the click of a cabinet latch. Nathaniel Cross saw something. Gideon gave a small sigh, the kind adults used when explaining weather to children. The Alpha King sees many things. Seeing is not proving. Hannah should have walked away. She knew that. There were rules for girls with weak standing, and the first was never stand near powerful people when they believed themselves unwatched. But her feet remained on the cold floor, and her pulse settled into a strange, steady rhythm. Inside the archive, Vanessa said, "What if the stone responds tomorrow?" Gideon's answer came too quickly. "It will not respond to you until the Mercer girl is removed from the circle." The words entered Hannah quietly. There was no dramatic gasp, no sudden stagger. Only a clean space opening in her mind where fear had been. Removed from the circle. Not dismissed. Not ignored. Removed. "You told everyone her blood was weak," Vanessa whispered. "It is weak on paper," Gideon said. More papers shifted. "That has been sufficient for 20 years. Hannah leaned closer without meaning to. Through the narrow gap, she saw the long archive table covered in ledgers, black ribbon seals, and a lamp burning low under green glass. Gideon stood with the blood registry open before him. Vanessa's white sleeve hovered near the page as if she were afraid to touch it. Her mother was not a border woman, was she? Vanessa asked. Gideon did not answer at first. When he did, his voice lost its patience. Caroline Mercer was born Caroline Vale before she married beneath her station and made herself inconvenient. Her line should have ended in silence. The old Luna branch was erased for a reason. Hannah's fingers tightened around the handkerchief until the damp cloth pressed cold into her palm. Caroline Vale. The name felt unfamiliar and intimate at once, like finding a locked room in the house where you had grown up. Gideon turned one page, then another. The stone does not choose purity. It chooses origin. That is why the registry had to be corrected. Corrected. Hannah almost smiled then, not because anything was funny, but because the word was so small for what it had done to her life. A scratch of ink. A missing surname. A mother turned into a footnote. Vanessa's voice thinned. And if she finds out? Gideon closed the registry with a soft, final sound. Girls like Hannah Mercer do not find things. They are told what they are, and they spend their lives believing it. In the corridor, Hannah looked down at her left hand. Beneath the faint silver stain, a pale crescent mark had begun to rise on her skin. Hannah did not run from the archive door. Running belonged to panic, and panic would make noise. She stepped back one careful inch, then another, until the shadow of the corridor took her out of reach of the lamplight spilling through the narrow gap. The crescent on her palm faded almost as soon as she looked at it, leaving only a warmth beneath the skin and the faint silver dampness from the basin. For one wild second, she wanted to press her hand against the door and demand every answer that had been kept from her. She wanted to say her mother's name in the voice Gideon had used to bury it. Caroline Vale. Caroline Mercer. Not a mistake. Not a stain. Not weak. But Hannah had spent too many years among people who confused volume with power. She knew better. Loud truths were easy to punish. Hidden truths could grow teeth. She turned away and moved down the servants' passage with the towel folded over her wrist as if she had only finished an errand. The corridor narrowed near the winter pantry, where the stone floor dipped and held cold even in late spring. Moonridge Court had hundreds of such small flaws, and Hannah knew nearly all of them. She knew which stair groaned on the west landing. She knew which door latch needed lifting before it opened. She knew that the younger guards near the lower archive changed shifts 10 minutes after the tower bell because one of them always stopped at the kitchen for coffee sweetened with maple sugar. No counselor had ever considered this knowledge valuable. That was why it was hers. She reached the west laundry without meeting anyone important, which in Moonridge meant she had crossed half the keep unseen. Martha Reed was there, sleeves rolled to the elbow, pressing damp linen with the severe concentration of a woman who had survived longer than anyone expected by appearing interested only in steam and starch. She did not look up when Hannah entered. "You are late," Martha said. Hannah placed the ceremonial towel on the table. Her hands shook once, then went still. "They changed my mother's name." The iron paused above the linen. Only for a heartbeat. Then Martha set it upright with care. "Did they say Vale?" Hannah's throat tightened, but she nodded. Martha closed her eyes, and the room seemed to age around her. When she opened them again, there was no surprise left, only something older and sadder than fear. I wondered how long paper could hold back blood. Hannah almost laughed because she did not know what else her body wanted to do with the sentence. Martha crossed to the bread shelf and took down a small cloth-wrapped loaf, rosemary and cracked wheat from the smell of it, still warm near the center. She put it into Hannah's hands. "Eat. Martha. You will think better if you eat." The words were so ordinary that Hannah had to blink hard. Martha then reached into the pocket of her apron and drew out a key no longer than Hannah's thumb, dark brass with a crescent cut into the bow. "Your mother gave me this the week before she married Thomas Mercer. She said there might come a day when a locked thing needed someone stubborn enough to open it." Hannah stared at the key. "Why did you not tell me?" Martha's mouth tightened, not with anger, but with the weight of old obedience. "Because knowing too soon can be as dangerous as knowing too late." The answer hurt because it was probably true. Hannah took the key and tucked it inside her sleeve beside the damp handkerchief. Martha moved to the door, listened, then pulled it open just enough to look into the passage. Lower archive, old foundation room. Behind the statue with the broken lantern. Go before the reception ends. When they start drinking wine, men with secrets become men who believe locks are enough. Hannah stood there with the bread warm in one hand and the key cold against her wrist, feeling her life divide itself into before and after without asking her permission. "What am I looking for?" she asked. Martha looked at her then, fully, the way almost no one in Moonridge ever did. "Not what? Who?" Hannah understood only after she left the laundry and followed the narrow stairs downward, past the smell of soap, ash, and old stone. She was not searching for a weapon. She was not searching for revenge. She was searching for the woman her mother had been before the council turned her into a lie. The lower archive had not been built for comfort. It sat beneath the oldest part of Moonridge Court, where the walls were not dressed stone but foundation rock, cold and uneven, with veins of pale mineral running through them like old scars filled with moonlight. Hannah carried no candle at first. She knew the way by memory until the laundry stairs ended, and after that she moved by touch, one hand on the wall, the other holding the warm loaf of bread against her ribs as if heat could become courage if she kept it close enough. The air smelled of dust, dry ink, and the kind of damp that belonged to rooms forgotten by everyone except servants and secrets. Martha had said the statue with the broken lantern. Hannah found it near the back, half hidden behind stacked crates of damaged ledgers, a stone woman with a covered face and one hand extended, the lantern in her palm cracked clean through. Hannah had passed this statue twice a month for years while carrying storage lists, and she had never wondered why the figure's other hand was pressed flat against the wall behind her. People rarely noticed what they believed had no purpose. She set the bread on a crate, took the key from her sleeve, and searched along the base of the statue until her fingers found a crescent-shaped hollow beneath the woman's stone wrist. The key turned with a sound so soft it seemed less like metal moving than a breath being released. A narrow panel opened in the foundation wall. Inside was not a chamber, not the dramatic hidden room her childhood stories would have promised, but a shallow stone compartment lined with cedar and blue cloth. Hannah almost laughed at the plainness of it. After years of being afraid of her mother's mystery, she had expected something grand enough to explain the fear. Instead, there was a bundle of letters tied with faded silver ribbon, a thin leather registry marked with the Vale crest, and a pendant wrapped in linen so old it had yellowed at the folds. She touched the pendant first because her hand moved before thought could interfere. It was silver, heavier than it looked, shaped like a crescent moon surrounding a small dark stone. The same crescent as the mark that had risen on her palm. The same curve as the pale veins inside the ancient Luna stone. Hannah held it, and the silence inside her shifted. Not broke. Not yet. It shifted the way a sleeping animal might turn toward a familiar voice. She opened the registry with careful fingers. Names filled the pages in dark brown ink: Vale women, Vale daughters, Vale Lunas, each line paired with a moon phase and a witness seal. Near the final page, the writing changed. Caroline Vale, moonborn heir, bonded by choice to Thomas Mercer, border captain of Moonridge. Not erased. Not weak. Not unverified. Written clearly enough that Hannah had to sit down on the edge of a crate because her knees no longer trusted the floor. She pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth and did not cry. Crying would come later, maybe. At that moment, grief was too precise for tears. Her mother had existed fully on this page. Her name had weight. Her blood had history. The council had not discovered Hannah was nothing. They had made a place on paper where nothing could be filed. A sound moved through the archive then, not a footstep exactly, but the change that came before one. The draft stilled. The tiny flame in the wall lantern near the stairs narrowed and stood straight. Hannah closed the registry halfway and turned. Nathaniel Cross stood at the edge of the foundation room, one hand resting lightly at his side, his expression controlled, his presence too large for the low ceiling and narrow stone walls. He did not look surprised to find her there. That unsettled her more than surprise would have. "You followed me," Hannah said. Her voice came out quiet, but it did not shake. "No," Nathaniel said. "I followed the stone." She looked down at the pendant in her hand. Its dark center had begun to glow, not brightly, not enough to fill the room, only enough to make the blue cloth inside the hidden compartment look like midnight water. Nathaniel's gaze moved from the pendant to her left palm, where the crescent mark had returned in a faint silver line. For the first time since he had entered Moonridge Court, something like concern crossed his face. It was gone almost immediately, but Hannah saw it. "What is this?" she asked. He stepped no closer. That mattered. Every powerful man in her life had taken space first and explained later. Nathaniel remained where he was, as if he understood that an answer offered from a distance could still be a kind of respect. "It is not a council relic," he said. "It is a Luna origin mark." Hannah looked. Back at the registry, at Caroline Vale's name, at the pendant warming in her palm. "Gideon called my blood weak." Nathaniel's eyes darkened, not with anger that spilled outward, but with something colder and more disciplined. "Then Gideon either lied," he said, "or he is more afraid of your blood than he wants the room to know." Far above them, through stone and distance, a deep sound rolled through Moonridge Court. Not a bell. Not thunder. The ancient Luna stone was answering again. By the time Hannah returned to the upper halls, Moonridge Court had dressed itself in celebration as if the night had not cracked open beneath her feet. Garlands of white mountain laurel hung from the moon-arched silver ribbons had been tied around the backs of every chair. The long tables were crowded with crystal glasses, polished plates, and baskets of warm bread no one at the front would touch until the council gave permission to begin. Everything looked orderly, which Hannah had come to understand was often the first warning sign. Order could be beautiful. It could also be the cloth laid over a stain before guests arrived. She had hidden the Vale registry beneath a folded stack of laundry in Martha Reed's room, where no counselor would think to look because men like Gideon Thorne believed clean sheets appeared by magic and vanished by obedience. The pendant, however, remained beneath the neckline of Hannah's gray dress, warm against her skin. Nathaniel had said little after the sound rolled through the stone above them. He had not demanded the registry. He had not told her what to do. He had only looked toward the ceiling, where dust had drifted down from the old foundation seams, and said, "Tomorrow, they will try to finish this before the stone can speak clearly." Hannah had understood him. So when a junior steward found her near the servants' corridor at dawn and told her Counselor Thorne required her assistance for the selection ceremony, she did not ask why. She already knew. They wanted her close enough to control, visible enough to diminish, and low enough that no one would mistake her presence for importance. They gave her a copper pitcher filled with spring water and instructed her to stand 2 steps behind the ceremonial line. Not with the eligible women. Not with the families. Not even with the scribes. She was to pour water over the stone's base when called and then step back with her eyes lowered. The humiliation was precise. Hannah almost admired the craftsmanship of it. Vanessa Hale entered at mid-morning to a room that had been arranged for her victory. Her white gown caught every candle, every strip of pale window light, every approving glance. Pearls circled her throat. Her mother cried quietly into a lace handkerchief. Gideon stood beside the ancient Luna stone with the charter open in front of him, his voice full of reverence now that reverence served his plans. The old rites endure, he declared, though he had called the stone symbolic only hours before. The chosen candidate will place her hand upon the stone, and Moonridge will witness harmony between blood, law, and future. Hannah stood behind the line with the pitcher heavy in both hands and felt the pendant beat softly once against her chest. Nathaniel Cross waited near the platform, not at its center. That also mattered. He had given Gideon the room he wanted, and by doing so, had made every lie easier to see. Vanessa stepped forward. She moved gracefully, the way girls trained from childhood to be watched often did. Her hand hovered over the ancient Luna stone, then settled flat against its surface. The entire hall held its breath. Nothing happened. At first, the silence seemed ceremonial. Then it became noticeable. Then it became dangerous. Vanessa's smile remained, but her fingers pressed harder against the stone. Gideon turned a page of the charter without reading it. Some relics answer in their own time, he said smoothly. The absence of light is not the absence of blessing. A murmur moved through the room, uncertain and thin. Hannah's palms had begun to warm around the copper handle. Gideon looked over his shoulder, and his eyes found her with an irritation so sharp it almost felt like fear. "Water," he ordered. Hannah stepped forward. The pitcher was heavier than it should have been, and the distance to the stone seemed longer than the few feet beneath her shoes. She lowered herself beside the base, careful not to touch the carved surface, careful not to look at Nathaniel, careful not to let the room see that her heart was moving too fast. As she tipped the pitcher, a drop of water ran over the rim and onto her left hand. The crescent mark beneath her skin flashed silver. Hannah startled, just slightly. The pitcher slipped against the edge of the stone, and a small line of water spilled across the floor. Vanessa made a soft sound of annoyance. Gideon began to say her name. Then Hannah's fingers brushed the stone's base. The reaction was not loud at first. It began as a pulse of light under dark rock, low and deep, like moonrise trapped beneath a frozen lake. The pale veins inside the ancient Luna stone brightened one by one, climbing upward beneath Vanessa's motionless hand, ignoring her completely, bending instead toward Hannah where she knelt with water on her sleeve and astonishment caught behind her ribs. The hall went still in a way Hannah had never heard before. Not polite stillness. Not council stillness. Wolf stillness. Every instinct in the room had turned toward her. From somewhere within the stone came a long, resonant sound, not quite a howl and not quite a bell, but old enough to make the torches bow. Hannah looked up. Nathaniel was already looking at her, and this time, he did not hide what he understood. The light climbed the ancient Luna stone as if it had been waiting beneath the surface for longer than anyone in the hall had been alive. It moved past Vanessa's hand without warming her skin, past Gideon's open charter without honoring a single word written there, and gathered instead around Hannah's fingers where they rested against the base. She tried to pull back. Not because it hurt. It did not. That was the strangest part. The light felt less like fire than recognition, the quiet warmth of stepping into a room where someone had saved a chair for you without knowing whether you would survive long enough to reach it. The crescent on her palm brightened, and a matching mark appeared in the stone, silver against dark blue-gray, exact in curve and size. The hall released a single shared breath. Vanessa snatched her hand away as if the stone had insulted her. Gideon's face changed for less than a second, but Hannah saw it. The careful disappointment, the legal patience, the polished authority all slipped, and beneath them was fear. Then he recovered because men like Gideon were trained to make fear sound like procedure. "Step away from the relic," he ordered. Hannah remained on her knees, the copper pitcher tipped beside her, water spreading in a thin shining line across the floor. "This is an irregular reaction," Gideon said to the room, louder now. "A contamination of the right. The Mercer girl has already been tested and found unfit." The word unfit moved strangely through the air, weaker than it had the night before. It no longer landed cleanly. Too many people were looking at the stone. Too many had seen the light choose its direction. Vanessa lifted her chin, but her throat moved as she swallowed. "She touched it during my ceremony," she said. "That does not make it hers." Hannah looked down at her hand. The mark was no longer hidden beneath the skin. It sat there clearly, a pale crescent with a fine line through the center like the first thread of dawn. She thought of her mother's pendant under her dress, the registry hidden in Martha's laundry room, the name Caroline Vale written where no council correction could reach it. For years Hannah had believed her life was small because every room she entered had made itself narrow around her. Now the largest room in Moonridge could not contain the silence gathering at her back. Gideon took one step toward her. Nathaniel Cross moved first. Not quickly. Not dramatically. He simply stepped down from the platform, and the room adjusted to him the way water adjusts to stone. The guards did not reach for him. The counselors did not speak over him. Even Gideon stopped with one hand still lifted. Nathaniel came only far enough to stand between Hannah and the council's shadow, not between Hannah and the room. That difference mattered so much that her chest tightened. He looked at Gideon, then at the charter, then at the stone still glowing around Hannah's hand. "If this is procedure," Nathaniel said, his voice low enough that everyone leaned inward to hear it, "then follow the oldest procedure." Gideon's mouth thinned. "Your Majesty, the local council has already determined her status. The stone has disagreed." The words were calm. Final, but not cruel. Nathaniel turned to Hannah then, and the force of the room turned with him. She expected him to command her to stand. She expected him to announce something over her head, to make her another object in a contest between powerful people. Instead, he offered no hand and gave no order. He only asked, "Hannah Mercer, do you claim the right to speak before this council?" The question struck more deeply than any declaration could have. No one had asked her to claim anything in Moonridge. She had been assigned places, given tasks, corrected, dismissed, measured, and named by others. Claiming was for people whose hands were believed clean enough to hold power. Hannah rose slowly. Water dripped from the hem of her sleeve. The stone's light followed her, not like a chain, but like a witness. She reached beneath the neckline of her dress and drew out her mother's pendant. A sharp murmur ran through the hall as the silver crescent caught the same light burning in the rock. Gideon's face went pale. Hannah placed the pendant on the open charter before him. Her hand no longer shook. "I claim the name you buried," she said. The pendant rested on the charter like a small moon laid over a map of lies. For a moment, no one moved. Even the silver ribbons tied to the chairs seemed to hang more still than cloth had any right to be. Hannah could hear water ticking from her sleeve onto the stone floor, one drop at a time, impossibly loud in the space where Gideon Thorne had always expected his voice to be the only sound that mattered. He stared at the pendant, and something in his eyes confirmed what no document had yet said aloud. He knew it. He had always known it. Hannah felt a strange calm move through her, not peace, not forgiveness, but steadiness, the kind that comes when a door you were told was a wall finally opens under your hand. "That trinket proves nothing," Gideon said. His voice was smooth again, but too smooth, like ice laid over running water. Old families misplace symbols. Servants steal keepsakes. A desperate girl may misunderstand whatever she finds in a laundry room or a cellar. Vanessa looked quickly at him then, and Hannah saw the mistake land between them. He had mentioned a cellar. No one else had. Nathaniel's gaze shifted, only slightly, toward the council table. "You know where she found it." Gideon's mouth closed. Hannah did not look at Nathaniel for help. She was grateful for his presence, for the way his question pinned the room open, but the next step had to be hers. She reached into the hidden pocket Martha had sewn inside her gray dress years ago for spare pins and small coins, and drew out a folded page from the veil registry. She had not taken the whole book. She had not needed to. The page carried her mother's name, the veil crest, and 3 witness seals pressed into the lower margin. Her fingers were careful as she unfolded it on top of the charter beside the pendant. Caroline Vale, Hannah said, and the name seemed to change the air around her. Moonborn heir. Bonded by choice to Thomas Mercer of Moonridge. Recorded under the old rite, witnessed by Elder Mara Vale, Keeper Samuel Reed, and Counselor Gideon Thorne. The hall stirred. Not loudly. The reaction was worse for being quiet. People turned toward Gideon with the slow attention of wolves realizing a familiar trail had been false. Gideon reached for the page, but Nathaniel placed 2 fingers on the edge of the charter before Gideon could touch it. Not a threat. A boundary. Let her finish, Nathaniel said. Hannah swallowed once. Her throat felt dry, but her voice held. Last night, the basin showed nothing because the registry used for my verification was not complete. My mother's name was altered. Her birth line was removed. Her origin mark was buried under a classification that never belonged to her. She looked down at the charter, then at the ancient Luna stone glowing behind her. You called that correction. A murmur moved through the council wives, through the elders, through the younger wolves standing near the rear doors. Martha had entered quietly at the back of the hall. She held a laundry basket on one hip as if she had arrived by accident, but her eyes were fixed on Hannah, and there was no accident in them. Gideon lifted his chin. Even if Caroline Vale existed as you claim, the old branches were dissolved. The present council holds authority over Luna succession. Not over origin, Hannah said. She turned the charter 1 page forward. The words were faded, but still readable beneath the stone's light. She had seen them in the lower archive, copied in the margin of the veil registry in her mother's hand. The stone shall not answer to rank purchased by alliance, nor purity certified by council, but to the moonborn line able to steady the pack when law fails. She heard someone gasp. Vanessa stepped back from the platform, her white skirts brushing the silver ribbons at the chair behind her. Her face was pale, not with ugliness, not with villainy, but with the grief of a woman who had been promised a crown by people who knew it was not theirs to give. Gideon's composure thinned. This is manipulation. The girl has been coached. Hannah looked at him fully then. For years, she had lowered her eyes because it made other people comfortable. She did not lower them now. No, she said. I was erased. There is a difference. The stone brightened at the word erased, and every wolf in the hall felt it. Shoulders shifted. Heads turned. The guards at the platform, men who had served the council for years, took 1 step back from Gideon and 1 step toward the light. Not because Hannah commanded them. Because something older than command had named what was true. Nathaniel lowered himself to 1 knee before her, and the sound that passed through the hall was not shock, exactly. It was recognition arriving late. He bowed his head, not as a man surrendering power, but as a king acknowledging the power that had been hidden from all of them. Hannah looked over him, past the council, to the back of the room where Martha stood with tears she refused to wipe away. Then Hannah turned back to Gideon. Before you speak another word about my blood, she said, quiet enough that everyone had to listen carefully, you will read my mother's name aloud. Gideon. Thorne did not reach for the page again. Perhaps he understood at last that paper could no longer protect him from the truth written on it. Perhaps he only understood that every eye in Moonridge Court had changed its weight. The same families who had nodded when Hannah was dismissed now watched him as if a door had opened beneath his chair. His hands remained at his sides for several seconds too long. Then, with Nathaniel Cross still on 1 knee before the stone and Hannah standing above the charter with water drying on her sleeve, Gideon lowered his gaze to the veil registry page. His voice was thin when it came. Caroline Vale, he said. The stone brightened. Hannah felt the name pass through the room and return to her differently, no longer something whispered through a half-open archive door, no longer a secret carried by servants and hidden keys, but a living name spoken where it had been denied. Gideon swallowed. Moonborn heir, bonded by choice to Thomas Mercer of Moonridge. Martha Reed made a sound at the back of the hall, small and broken, and covered it by shifting the laundry basket against her hip. Hannah did not look away from Gideon. Again, she said. A few counselors stiffened. Nathaniel did not move. The stone hummed low beneath the floor. Gideon read the name again, clearer this time, because the room demanded it even if his pride did not. Caroline Vale. Caroline Mercer. Mother. The correction began before sunset. Not the neat, private correction the council would have preferred, but a public one, with witnesses from every household still seated in the hall. The altered registry was brought from the archive. The scraped ink was shown under lamplight. The old charter was read from beginning to end, including the passage Gideon had spent half his life pretending was ceremonial. By midnight, his council's seal lay on the table in front of Nathaniel, surrendered without spectacle, and Vanessa Hale had left the platform with her mother's arm around her shoulders, not ruined, but released from a promise that had never truly belonged to her. Hannah was grateful for that. She had learned enough about stolen futures not to wish one on another woman. 3 days later, her mother's full name was carved back into the Moonridge record wall. Hannah stood in the courtyard while the mason worked, the spring wind lifting loose strands of her hair against her cheek. The letters appeared slowly in pale stone, each one ordinary and miraculous. Martha stood beside her with a basket of rosemary bread, because some forms of love arrived warm and wrapped in cloth. Nathaniel stood on Hannah's other side, close enough for his presence to steady the space, far enough that no one could mistake him for the reason she belonged there. When the final mark was finished, he looked at her, not at the crowd gathered behind them. Moonridge will accept you as Luna by ancient claim, he said. The Northern Territories will honor it. Hannah touched the pendant at her throat. The silver was cool now, peaceful against her skin. Accepting is not the same as choosing, she said. A quiet smile touched Nathaniel's mouth, almost hidden, but real. Then choose in your own time. That was when Hannah understood the difference between being wanted and being taken. No one pulled her forward. No one renamed her for convenience. No one placed a crown on her head to make their own story neater. In the weeks that followed, she reopened the lower archive and made it a registry for every wolf whose name had been shortened, softened, misspelled, or buried because someone powerful had found the truth inconvenient. People came quietly at first, then in lines that stretched past the winter pantry. Hannah listened to each of them. She wrote carefully. She learned that restoration was not a single glowing moment in a hall, but the slower work of giving people back the words they had lost. And each morning, when she crossed the great hall, the ancient Luna stone answered with a soft silver light. Not loud. Not demanding. Only present. Hannah would pause beside it, place her hand near the mark that matched her own, and think of her mother no longer as a rumor, but as a root. Nathaniel often waited near the moon arch, never in front of her path, always beside it. One morning, with the record wall shining behind them and Moonridge waking under a pale northern sun, Hannah took his hand by choice. The stone warmed under her palm, the pack lowered their heads, and for the first time in her life, Hannah Mercer did not feel chosen because others had finally seen her. She felt chosen because she had finally claimed herself.